The ballroom lights in Buckhead were the color of gold, and every camera lens hunted for the same picture. Marcus Reed, sharp navy tucks, diamond cufflinks, standing center stage beside a woman in a backless silver dress. Vanessa Cole tilted her chin and pressed close to his arm, as if the spotlight belonged to her. The two of them smiled for the photographers, like the king and queen of a city that bowed when they passed. Across the waxed floor, Lila Adeyemi sat in her wheelchair, parked near a pillar wrapped in orchids. Her dress was midnight blue, soft satin pooled over her knees. She was 29, the same age as Marcus, and since the accident, her legs no longer obeyed. She curled one hand around the rim of the chair to keep it from drifting, the other resting on her lap, steady as a stone. When she caught Marcus's eye, she did what she always did, offered the gentlest, smallest smile, the kind that could make a tired person breathe again. He looked past her. "Marcus, one more," a photographer called. "Of course," Marcus said, teeth bright. Then he waved toward the pillar. "Could we get a clean background? The wheelchair is crowding the shot." The word landed like a slap that echoed. Conversation stopped. A waiter froze mid-step, balancing a tray of champagne. Layla's throat went tight. For the first time all night, Vanessa looked toward the pillar, not with kindness, but with a neat, practiced pity. "Baby," Marcus said loudly so half the room could hear, "could you be a dear and move back a bit? We don't want this machine in every frame." Someone laughed because they didn't know what else to do. Someone else stared at the floor. A woman in a jeel shook her head and whispered, "God forbid." Layla's cheeks burned. The chair was locked. She had to unlock it to move. The lock resisted, the way locks do when pride is heavier than hands. She kept her voice calm. "I'm fine where I am, Marcus." Vanessa's hand slid up his arm. "It's just for a second," she said, sweet as a spoonful of sugar. "We worked so hard for this gala. Let's make it perfect." Perfect, at the cost of her. The music from the band, Afro beats woven with R&B, wobbled and steadied again. Lila unclipped the lock with a small click and rolled herself back, past the orchids, until the pillar blocked her from the flash of cameras. She could still see them in profile. She could still hear the applause when Marcus raised the microphone. "Welcome," he said, "to the Reed Foundation Gala, building homes, building futures." He didn't mention that it was Layla who had drawn the first sketch for their tiny homes project. He didn't mention that she'd dreamed it up one long night in the rehab hospital, when pain tucked itself under her ribs and refused to leave. He didn't mention the afternoons she'd spent on video calls teaching volunteers to measure a straight line. He spoke about vision. He spoke about strength. He gingerly avoided using the word "we." Halfway through his speech, he stepped aside and, still smiling, beckoned Vanessa to the mic. "Our partner," he said, "a woman with taste, drive, and the kind of elegance that inspires." Vanessa thanked the donors, then let her voice turn soft. "Marcus," she said, "you carried this city on your back. Tonight, you deserve someone who can stand beside you." The room laughed as if that was clever, not cruel. Layla felt each sound scrape. Then came the knife. A reporter shouted, "Where's your wife, Marcus? Can we get the three of you?" Marcus's smile didn't slip, but his eyes iced over. "She's here," he said, "but tonight is a professional moment. I don't want pity in the headline." He had used the private word in public. Pity. Layla's lungs forgot how to work. She eased her chair forward just enough to clear the pillar, and the nearest table looked away as if eye contact would burn. Auntie Bissy reached for her hand, but Layla shook her head. Pride again. It held her together when nothing else did. She rolled toward the stage, not to cause a scene, but because she had to leave. She would ask the valet to bring the van. She would go home to silence and the hum of the fish tank and the one plant on the sill that always leaned toward the sun like a believer. She would not cry. But as she drew level with the front row, a security guard, new, too eager, lifted a velvet rope to block her path. "Backstage is restricted, ma'am," he said, staring at the chair instead of her face. Before Layla could answer, Marcus stepped down from the stage, all charm. He took the handles of her chair without asking. "Allow me," he said into the microphone, and the crowd laughed again, relief and spectacle mixing. He spun her gently, too gently, like a stage prop, and aimed her at the side exit. Into the mic, grinning, he said, "Teamwork makes the dream work." The cameras flashed. In that strobe white moment, everyone saw it. A husband guiding his wife as if she were a piece of equipment that needed storing. Vanessa clapped like it was cute. The band tried to find a new groove and failed. "Marcus, stop," Layla said, her voice low. "Stop this now." He leaned over her shoulder and whispered, "Don't be dramatic. You know how these nights are. Investors don't like distractions." Her hands tightened on the wheel rims. She could smell his cologne, clean and expensive. She could see his cufflinks, tiny squares of winter light. She could taste metal. A click cut through the hum, the AV tech switching inputs. The 10-foot screen behind the stage blinked from the gala logo to black, and then to the still frame of an older man with salt hair and eyes that looked like hers. Yinka Adeyemi, her grandfather. Nigerian-born contractor turned Atlanta builder. The man who taught her how to read a blueprint before she was 10. He had been gone for 8 months. He should not be on a screen at the Reed Foundation Gala. The room hushed so hard that silence became a kind of sound. "If you are seeing this, my Layla." The recording began, the voice gentle and measured. "Then someone has forgotten who you are." Marcus dropped the chair handles as if they burned. Vanessa's smile snapped off. Heads turned like grass in wind. Layla stared at her grandfather's face, steady, kind, unmovable, and felt the floor of the night tilt under every shoe. The video paused, a loading wheel spinning once, twice. Then the lights flickered and cut. Darkness, a small shout, the clink of a dropped glass, the sharp scrape of the security guard's radio. For a breath, everything was shadows. When the backup lights pulsed on, Layla was already moving the chair by feel, hands sure on metal. She turned toward the screen again, but the AV tech was scrambling, the sound hissing. Someone at the back yelled for a manager. Someone at the front whispered a prayer. "Who authorized that?" Marcus said, voice tight now, not made for microphones. "Turn it off." The AV tech shook his head. "It's scheduled," he said. "It's locked. I can't." Locked, scheduled, deliberate. Layla's heart beat against her ribs like a bird testing the sky. She looked across the room and found Uncle Tunda near the exit, hands folded behind him, the posture of a man who knows how to wait. He nodded once, not a smile, a knowing. The screen flared back to life, and her grandfather's eyes seemed to find hers through time and pixels. "My Layla," the voice repeated, stronger now, filling the ballroom. "I left you a door that only opens when the world treats you small." Gasps curled like smoke. Cameras raised again, not for charity, but for history. Marcus stepped forward, trying to take command of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, hands out as if calming a horse, "we're having a technical issue. Please enjoy The video overrode him. "If they humiliate you in public," Yinka said, "then your protection must be public as well." Vanessa reached for Marcus's arm. "What is happening?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He stared at the screen the way a man stares at a locked safe he didn't know existed. A watermark slid into the corner of the video. Adeyemi Trust, confidential. The lawyers in the room inhaled as one. Layla felt her breath return, slow and deep, like the ocean after a storm. She had not planned this, but someone had, someone who loved her beyond his own life. The recording leaned forward. "To any man who would shame my granddaughter," Yinka said, the words as simple as a proverb. "Understand this, the ground you walk on may carry her name." The gala doors at the back opened, and two people in dark suits entered with a locked steel case and a notary seal in a leather book. They scanned the room like they had rehearsed it. The case was set gently on the stage beside the microphone that still smelled of Marcus. Eyes flicked from the case to Layla to the screen. "Layla Adeyemi," the woman with the notary seal called, voice clear and official. "We have documents requiring your presence." Marcus found his voice. "Get them out," he snapped at the nearest guard. "Now." The guard didn't move. He had heard the word notary. He had seen the word trust. Auntie Bessie squeezed Layla's shoulder. "Stand or sit," she whispered. "You are still a mountain." Layla pushed her chair forward, the little electric whir barely louder than her breathing. Each turn of the wheel felt like a choice. She reached the foot of the stage. The steps ahead were too steep for her wheels. The room understood that at the same time, a quiet shift like air moving. "I'll help you up," someone said softly. It was Kofi, the driver who had brought her to therapy all those months, the one who played Fela during traffic and never asked personal questions. He and the stagehand lowered the small ramp used for gear. It clanged into place, narrow but solid. Layla set her palms, rolled forward, and began to climb. The ramp gave under her weight and held. Halfway up, Marcus stepped into her path. "Layla," he said, smile gone, voice low enough that only the front rows could hear. "Don't do this." She stopped. The whole city seemed to hold its breath. From the screen, her grandfather's voice came one last time, soft as a blessing and sharp as a blade. "Open the case." The latch on the steel box clicked. The lid lifted. Gasps rolled through the room like thunder over red clay. And inside, the seal on the steel case broke with a dull pop, and the notary lifted out a red folder with brass corners, a thick envelope, and a small velvet box. The ballroom leaned forward. Flashbulbs began again, slower now, as if everyone feared they might miss a word. "Per the instructions of the Adeyemi Family Trust," the notary said, "we are to deliver, read, and witness." Marcus stared at the folder like it was a grenade. "This is a private event," he said, trying to paste his gala voice back onto his face. "We will not be, sir," the notary replied without looking at him. "The trust required a public venue with at least 100 witnesses. Your gala meets the condition." A sound rose from the crowd. Half gasp, half laughter. Vanessa took a step back, as if distance could turn her invisible. On the screen, Layla's grandfather stilled on a frame that somehow held warmth even in pixels. The notary slid a document from the folder and read, her voice clean and measured. "Addendum to Last Will and Testament of Yinka Adeyemi. Upon the public humiliation of my granddaughter, Layla Temitope Adeyemi Reed, defined as any act of belittling, shaming, or diminishing her humanity in a public setting, the following actions shall occur." You could hear bracelets shift on wrists. You could hear the ice in glasses. The AV tech finally stopped trying to cut the feed and just watched. 1. The notary continued, transfer of ownership of properties listed in Schedule A to Layla Adeyemi Reed. She flipped the page. A projector snapped on, and a list spilled across the screen. 4 lots in southwest Atlanta, a warehouse near the Beltline, a lakeside plot in Stone Mountain, the title to a small apartment building in College Park, and, at the bottom, a surprise that sent a rustle through the room: the 10-acre parcel on which the Reed Foundation model community had been built. Marcus took a single step toward the list, and then another, as if moving closer might change a line on a page. "That's not possible," he said softly. "I bought those lots. I—" A man in a gray suit by the front row coughed. He was a banker, and he knew how liens worked. "2," the notary said, turning to the next sheet. "The assignment of 70% of all shares in Reed Coal Developments, a partnership registered in Fulton County, to the Adeyemi Trust, to be held for the benefit of Layla. These shares are currently held by nominees as per Schedule B." Vanessa's last name, Cole, hung in the air like a wire. She went still, lips parted, calculations flickering behind her eyes. Marcus's jaw moved once, twice, but no words came. "3," the notary went on, "the immediate release of the Adeyemi Emergency Fund in the amount of $100 million into an account titled in Layla's name, to be used at her sole discretion. Bank officers are present." At the back, 2 people in navy jackets raised small leather folders at the same time. They looked like flight attendants for a plane that only flew in one direction, up. For a heartbeat, the room said nothing. Then the sound came in a wave: breaths, whispers, "Yeah!" and "Ewo," and the sharp click-click of cameras catching a life turning. Layla's hands loosened on her wheels. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. Something older than either lived in her face now: recognition. Marcus found his voice. "This is showmanship," he said, turning in a tight circle that tried to include the audience in his disbelief. "A stunt. We built this foundation, Vanessa and I. We put in the work while some people—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The word hung there, while some people sat. Auntie Bessie stood. "Watch your mouth," she said, not loud, but in the tone that makes men stop. "Pain is not laziness." The notary ignored them all and opened the velvet box. Inside lay a small brass key, old and polished so often it glowed. "This," she said, "is to the green safe at Adeyemi and Sons. The instructions are to deliver the key to Layla alone." She held it out. Layla extended her palm. The key was warm from the box. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried the memory of hands that had held it before. Kofi adjusted the ramp a fraction, as if to give the moment balance. The notary cleared her throat. "There is one more item," she said, sliding the thick envelope free. "A letter," her voice softened, "dated 8 months ago." She held it toward Layla. The ballroom faded. For a breath there was only paper and a name written in her grandfather's handwriting. "My Layla." She traced the ink with her thumb, then slid a finger under the flap. The seal gave. The first page crackled like dry leaves in Harmattan. "My dear girl," it began, and even those who couldn't see the page felt the words in their bones. "You are the daughter of builders, not of walls, but of dignity. When I saw you sketch those tiny homes, I knew you were laying down a kind of shelter that money cannot measure." The letter told a short history: how Yinka had started with a hammer and a truck, how he had learned that the most valuable land in a city is not always the widest lot, but the narrow space where a person can stand and not be moved, how he had seen the way Marcus looked at Layla before the accident, with awe, and after the accident, with calculation. "People change when storms come," the letter read. "Some become roofs, some become leaks." Then a line that turned the room colder by a degree. "If the man beside you treats you like furniture, Do not argue with him on the night he performs. Let the house itself speak. Layla lowered the letter. Her eyes went to the list on the screen, then to the faces in the room. Family, donors, strangers, and finally to Marcus. He tried a smile again. "We can discuss this at home," he said through teeth that were no longer part of his face. "This is a misunderstanding." The banker in gray shook his head almost kindly. "The filings are real," he murmured to no one in particular. "I saw them last week." Vanessa slipped her hand from Marcus's arm. Her eyes moved to the words, "Read Cole Developments" on the screen and back to the floor. She might have cursed silently or prayed. From the rear, a woman in Ankara stepped forward. She was a lawyer. Her card would later reveal a name that carried weight in 2 continents. "Mrs. Adeyemi Reed," she said to Layla. "There is also a protective order in the trust that activates tonight. It prohibits any transfer of assets out of the company without your consent until a court hearing. Security for your property is waiting outside." Marcus laughed, short and too high. "My property," he said. "My company." The lawyer didn't blink. "Your grandfather was very thorough." The band packed their instruments quietly. Conversation turned into little flurries. A donor whispered to another, "I always wondered where the seed money came from." Another replied, "The man is bold but not careful." The notary closed the empty case. "Our duties are complete," she said. "A receipt, Mrs. Adeyemi Reed?" Layla nodded and signed where the woman pointed. Her signature was strong and unshaking. The pen glinted in the light like a little sword. It was only then, with the formalities done, that the noise of the room returned to itself and the meaning of the night sank in. People began to choose sides, those who would go to Marcus with soft words and those who would drift toward Layla, pretending they had always known. Uncle Tunde stepped close. "Child," he said, "do you want to go home?" Layla looked up at the screen where her grandfather's face still watched like a guardian carved into a doorway. She shook her head. "I want to go to Adeyemi and Sons." Marcus flinched like a wire had snapped inside him. "You don't need to do that," he said. "There's nothing there for you." Vanessa finally spoke. "Marcus," she whispered, careful now. "What else did he put in that safe?" He did not answer. His silence said more than any explanation. Kofi guided the chair down the ramp. The crowd parted, a path opening as if the room itself understood movement better than the man who had tried to control it. Outside, the cool night smelled of rain and asphalt and the fried plantains from a food truck down the block. At the curb, a black SUV idled. The bank officer nodded from the back seat. Another car drifted to a stop behind it. 2 security men unfolded themselves, polite and watchful. "Mrs. Adeyemi Reed," one said, "we'll escort you." Marcus pushed through the doors after her. "Layla," he called, his voice ricocheting off glass and stone. "Stop! You can't just walk out with my donors, my team." She turned the chair. "I am not walking out," she said simply. "I am leaving." He reached for the handles again. Kofi stepped between them, not aggressive, just present. Marcus's hand dropped. A cluster of donors, their faces polite in the way of people who have already recalculated, hovered at the edge of the sidewalk. A woman with a gold clutch cleared her throat. "Mrs. Adeyemi Reed," she said, choosing the name carefully. "About the model homes. We would love to hear your vision." Layla nodded once. "You will." She rolled toward the SUV. The bank officer opened the door and handed her a slim folder. Inside were account details, a debit card in her name, and a note from a manager who had grown up down the street from her grandfather's first office. The world was small when you built it yourself. She placed the key to the green safe in the little cup holder between the seats. It looked both out of place and exactly right. Back inside, the gala began to thin. Marcus stood alone for the first time since he had learned that charm could organize a room. Vanessa hovered 2 paces away, her eyes on a doorway that seemed to offer a new life if she could only choose it quickly enough. In the SUV, Layla let her head rest against the cool leather. The city slid by in lights. Peachtree, North Avenue, the stretch where the skyline makes a promise it sometimes keeps. Uncle Tunde's car followed behind, a shadow with headlights. Adeyemi and Sons? Kofi asked from the driver's seat. Yes, Layla said. Now. He turned east. As they passed the model community, those neat rows of tiny homes with porches big enough for 2 chairs and a plant, Layla pressed her palm to the window. She could see a string of solar lights, a child's bicycle, a woman watering a tomato plant at midnight because the heat never really left. This was the future she had drawn on scrap paper. This was the kind of dignity her grandfather meant. The SUV rolled to a stop on a quiet street lined with brick warehouses. Adeyemi and Sons was a simple building with a green-painted door and letters that had not needed changing in 30 years. Kofi cut the engine. The night held the breath of summer. Crickets sang in the cracks of concrete. Inside, the office smelled like cedar and old coffee. A framed photo on the wall showed a young Yinka with a hammer in one hand and a baby, her, in the other. The safe waited behind the counter, a square of green that had seen decades. Layla placed the brass key against the lock. It went in like a hand into a familiar glove. She turned it. The tumblers clicked, a sound like counting. The door swung open. On the top shelf was a black leather binder stamped with the same watermark as the video, Adeyemi Trust. Beneath it, a hard drive, a stack of signed agreements, and a small wooden box carved with a pattern of waves. She reached for the binder first. Inside were documents that mapped a history she hadn't fully known. Silent investments, loans made at 0 interest to small contractors who paid back with work and loyalty, equity pieces tucked into partnerships where her grandfather had smiled and let louder men take credit until the day he didn't. Near the back was a thin packet with her name. She slid it free. The title read, Post-Nuptial Agreement, Executed. Her eyes traced down the page, and the date hit like an electric pulse. It was 2 weeks after her accident, signed by her and by Marcus. The clause in the center burned brighter than the rest of the ink. In the event of spousal infidelity or public humiliation of either party by the other, all marital claims by the offending party to the non-offending party's separate property are waived in total. Her signature, his signature, a witness, a notary stamp. Kofi's breath caught. Uncle Tunde stepped closer, reading without a word. And tucked behind the last page, almost hidden, was a photograph, thin as a secret. Marcus in a restaurant booth. Vanessa's hair falling over his shoulder, their hands threaded under the table. The date and time were printed in the corner. The image was older than the accident. Layla raised her eyes from the ink to the room. The office lights hummed. Outside, a car moved down the street and back into the night. She slid the agreement into the binder and closed it with a soft thud. The wooden box beneath it weighted, heavier than something that small should be. She lifted the lid. Inside, on a bed of blue cloth, lay a set of house keys she recognized, a deed folded to the size of a palm, and a ring she had never seen before. Her grandmother's, maybe, emerald set in gold like a leaf caught in sunlight. She unfolded the deed. Her eyes moved over the words, careful, sure. The property address was not the warehouse, not the lots, not the model village. It was the deed to the home she and Marcus lived in. The Buckhead house with the white columns and the fig tree trained along the kitchen wall. Only one name sat on the line marked owner, and right there, in ink that had not faded at all, was the signature of the seller, Vanessa Cole. The paper trembled only because the air conditioner in the office shivered against the glass, not because Layla's hands were weak. Her fingers, steady now, traced Vanessa's signature. The deed was clean, properly filed, notarized, and sealed years ago. The home she lived in with Marcus, the same mansion where she had once believed in forever, had never belonged to him at all. It belonged to her. She folded the deed back into the box with deliberate care, like returning a weapon to its sheath. The emerald ring glowed against the blue cloth, as though her grandmother's spirit had been waiting for this very moment. Layla closed the lid. "Uncle," she said softly, "he's been building on what isn't his." Uncle Tunda nodded, a slow smile breaking like dawn. "Your grandfather always played long games. You are only seeing the board now." Marcus burst through the office doorway before Kofi could block him. His tie was crooked, his face pale with fury. "This is fraud, Layla. Do you hear me? Fraud. None of this will hold up in court." Layla turned her chair toward him. Her eyes no longer held the softness he once mistook for weakness. "Fraud?" she asked. "Your mistress signed the deed that keeps me standing. Your name was never on it. The only fraud here is the man who pretends to be a husband while living like a thief." Vanessa appeared behind him, heels clicking across the worn cedar floor. She looked not at Marcus, but at the box. "You never told me," she whispered, horror and calculation mixing in her tone. "You promised me that house was ours. You said it was only a matter of time before she faded into the background." Marcus spun on her. "Not here," he hissed, "not in front of them." But the words had already carved their wound. Vanessa's cheeks flushed, and for the first time since she'd entered the gala on his arm, she looked small. She turned, stepping away toward the door. "You lied to me, Marcus, to both of us. Do you know what that makes you?" "Enough," Marcus shouted. The office walls seemed too small to contain his rage. "I built everything. I earned the respect of this city. I'm the man they invite to galas, the man they write about in the papers. What are you without me, Layla? A chair with wheels, a name on paper?" The words hit like stones, but they did not break. Instead, they bounced against a wall her grandfather had built with foresight and faith. "You want to know what I am without you?" Layla said, her voice firm, almost regal. She lifted the binder with the trust documents and placed it on her lap. "I am a woman who owns the land you walk on, the roof you live under, the company you pretend is yours. I am the granddaughter of Yinka Adeyemi, and I carry his name." That is something you cannot humiliate, Marcus. Not tonight. Not ever. For a long second, silence filled the office. The only sound was the hum of the safe door still open, its secrets bared to the night. Marcus's chest rose and fell too fast. His eyes darted to the binder, to the deed, to the emerald ring. His jaw clenched. Then he laughed, a thin, hollow sound. "Paper won't protect you, Layla. You think these people will stand by you when the lights dim? You think money buys loyalty? You've never been more naive." Kofi stepped forward, solid as a wall. "Money doesn't buy loyalty," he said evenly, "but respect does, and tonight, she has more of it than you ever will." Marcus sneered, but the words found their mark. He backed toward the door, muttering about lawyers, about how nothing was over. His shadow disappeared into the street. Vanessa didn't follow him. Uncle Tunda exhaled. "He won't let this go," he warned. "A man like that doesn't surrender gracefully. He will try to twist what he cannot hold." Layla nodded. Her hand rested on the key again, heavy and reassuring. Then let him try, she said. The ground is mine now. She closed the safe door with a firm push. The lock clicked shut, the sound echoing like a drumbeat of finality. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the distance, as if the sky itself had decided to bear witness. The night had only just begun. The storm broke as Marcus drove aimlessly through the night, rain lashing against the windshield like the sky itself was furious. His knuckles gripped the wheel until they whitened. The city that once bowed to him now felt like a cage. He slammed his fist against the dashboard, muttering curses, replaying every word, every humiliating moment at the gala. The trust, the deed, the recording of Yenka. It wasn't just money, it was power, legacy, control. All of it stripped from him in one night by a woman he had convinced himself was broken. Vanessa's voice echoed in his head, sharp and cutting. You lied to me. He had thought she would stay, clinging to the wealth and influence he promised. Instead, she had walked away in silence, leaving him exposed. But Marcus wasn't a man who gave up. No. If the city was slipping from his hands, he would claw it back, no matter how much blood it cost. Back at the Adeyemi and Sons office, Lila, Uncle Tunde, and Kofi sat in a circle of light. The rain pounded against the roof, but inside there was calm. The binder lay open across the desk. Documents spread like a map of the future. We have to be careful, Uncle Tunde said. Marcus won't accept this quietly. He knows too many people in high places. Layla adjusted her position in the chair, her voice steady. He can know the whole city. What he doesn't know is that my grandfather built alliances stronger than his promises. Contractors, lawyers, even banks owe him debts of honor. Marcus cannot undo that. Kofi leaned forward. Still, you should prepare. He's dangerous when cornered. Layla nodded. That's why we won't wait for him to strike. We move first. Tomorrow, I'll visit the model community myself. The people there need to know the truth, that their homes are safe, that Marcus no longer controls their lives. If we bring them into the light, he'll have fewer shadows to hide in. Meanwhile, Marcus pulled into the underground parking lot of a luxury high-rise. He stepped out into the rain-slicked concrete and dialed a number on his phone. A gruff voice answered. It's late, Marcus. What do you want? I need leverage, Marcus said coldly. Dig up everything on Layla. Her health records, her finances, anything. If she thinks she can humiliate me, I'll show the world what she really is. The man on the line chuckled darkly. Careful. Women like her, they surprise you. Just do it, Marcus snapped, slamming the phone shut. His reflection in the elevator mirror looked older than it had that morning. Haunted, desperate. Yet behind his eyes flickered the hunger of a man who would rather burn everything down than lose. The next morning, sunlight pierced the storm clouds. At the model community, children rode bicycles along the neat paths, and women hung laundry on lines stretched between porches. Layla arrived in her van, her presence drawing quiet stares at first, then smiles. Mrs. Reed? A young mother asked timidly, holding a baby on her hip. Call me Layla, she said warmly. This place belongs to you as much as it belongs to me. The crowd gathered as she rolled forward, Uncle Tunde and Kofi at her side. She spoke simply, without grandeur, the way her grandfather had always taught. My husband tried to claim what wasn't his. He will tell lies, but the truth is stronger. This community, your homes, your futures, they are secure. No one can take them from you. Not Marcus, not anyone. A cheer rose, not rehearsed, but real, spreading from porch to porch until it filled the air like music. But across the street, parked in a sleek black car, Marcus watched from behind tinted glass. His lips curled into a smile that held no warmth. He pulled out his phone again and whispered to the man on the other end, "Destroy her reputation. By the time I'm done, no one will cheer her name." That night, as Layla settled back into her home, Kofi brought her an envelope left at the front gate. Inside were printed photographs, grainy but cruelly intimate. Some were real, others clearly doctored. Layla at the rehab center, Marcus leaning close to Vanessa, and one manipulated image of Layla with another man. At the bottom of the pile was a note in Marcus's handwriting. "You think you've won? Watch how fast I take it all back." The house grew cold around her. Yet instead of breaking, Layla held the photos in her hands and whispered, "This ends with me." The storm had passed, but a new one was coming. Viewers, if you were in Layla's place, publicly humiliated, betrayed, but suddenly holding all the power, what would you do? Would you confront Marcus head on, or would you let the law and the trust destroy him quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The night pressed heavy on Buckhead, but Marcus was already working. In a suite high above the city, his phone buzzed with messages from private investigators, journalists he had bribed before, and two lawyers known for bending truth until it snapped. He leaned back in his chair, scrolling through the fabricated images his contact had sent. "These will break her," Marcus muttered. "No one will follow a woman whose name drips with scandal." But for all his plotting, Marcus forgot one truth. Scandal cuts both ways. At the Adeyemi home, Lila laid the forged photos across the dining table. The house was quiet, only the steady drip of rainwater from the roof gutters filling the silence. Uncle Tunde sat across from her, brows furrowed. "This is his hand," he said, tapping the note Marcus had left. "A desperate man. He knows the law isn't on his side, so he turns to lies." Kofi crossed his arms, pacing. "But people believe lies faster than truth. If he spreads these, some will doubt you, even if you win in court." Layla looked at the photos once more, then slid them into an envelope. "Then we won't fight him with silence. We'll fight him with light." The following morning, Layla called a press conference at the model community. Local news vans arrived, cameras rolling as curious neighbors gathered. She wore a simple cream blouse, her hair tied back neatly, her face calm but resolute. Standing before the podium, she lifted the envelope Marcus had sent. "Last night I received these," she said, pulling out the photos one by one. "Some real, some altered, all designed to shame me. My husband believes that if he dirties my name, he can steal my voice. But he forgets. I come from a line of builders. We do not silence ourselves. We build stronger." She held up the forged photo of her with another man. The crowd murmured, recognizing the deception immediately. "This is what Marcus Reed calls truth. This is the man you trusted to lead projects in your neighborhoods." Gasps spread. A few shook their heads, muttering, "Tufiakwa," and shame. Then she held up the deed to the model community, clear and legal. "This," she said firmly, "is the truth. This land belongs to the people, not to Marcus, not to greed. And my grandfather made sure no amount of lies could erase that." The applause came in waves, strong and certain. Reporters leaned forward, snapping photos of her holding the deed. By nightfall, the story on the evening news wasn't about Layla's supposed scandals. It was about Marcus Reed's desperate smear campaign. Marcus watched the coverage from his penthouse, rage simmering. He hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering like his plans. Vanessa stood near the door, arms crossed, no longer draped on his arm. "You can't win this way," she said. "The city sees through you now." Marcus wheeled around, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare preach to me. You enjoyed the money, the dinners, the trips. You're no different." Vanessa's lips tightened. I enjoyed the illusion, but illusions break. And you, Marcus, you're nothing without hers. She left him standing in the wreckage of glass and pride. That night, Layla received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 50s, elegant in Ankara, stepped into the living room. She introduced herself as Mrs. Ijoma Nwosu, a respected businesswoman and longtime ally of her grandfather. Your grandfather once saved my company from collapse, she said, her tone warm but serious. I owed him a debt. Tonight I return it to you. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were records, bank transfers, contracts, signatures, tying Marcus to fraudulent deals in 3 separate projects. Money siphoned, permits forged, kickbacks hidden. With this, Ijeoma said, you don't just defend yourself, you dismantle him. Layla closed the folder slowly, her resolve sharpening. Marcus had tried to ruin her with lies. She would bring him down with the truth. Far across the city, Marcus sat alone on his balcony, the skyline twinkling like a taunt. He sipped his whiskey and whispered to himself, if she thinks she can bury me, she's wrong. I'll drag her down with me. But even as he spoke, the ground beneath his empire was already cracking. The morning sun lit Atlanta like a stage light, but Marcus Reed felt none of its warmth. His phone buzzed nonstop, messages from investors, panicked board members, and news outlets demanding answers. The headlines were brutal. Charity King or Con Man? Marcus Reed under fire for fraud allegations. Documents tie Reed to kickbacks and housing deals. Each headline landed like a blow. He had spent years building an image of power, respect, and charisma. Now it was unraveling in hours. Marcus paced his penthouse, his jaw tight, his shirt wrinkled from a night without sleep. He barked into the phone. Do something, Richard. I pay you to make problems disappear. Buy off the papers. Silence the whistleblowers. But his lawyer's voice was weary. Marcus, the documents are real. The trust is airtight. The more we fight this, the worse you look. Marcus hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, the pieces clattering across the marble floor. He pressed his palms into his eyes. How did she do this? How did that broken woman cripple me in a single night? Meanwhile, Layla was at the model community again, surrounded by families who greeted her like kin. Children tugged at her sleeves, women offered her food, and men shook her hand with respect. The binder with Marcus's fraudulent deals lay safely tucked in her bag. Uncle Tunda sat beside her on a porch swing. You've done more in 3 days than Marcus did in 3 years, he said. Layla shook her head. This isn't about me. It's about the people who believed in him. He betrayed them. They deserve better. Kofi leaned against the railing, his voice steady. Better is here now. You are proof of that. But beneath the laughter and music of the community, danger still lurked. Marcus wasn't finished. If lies and fraud couldn't bury Layla, he would find another way. Late that night, he met with 2 men in a dimly lit bar on the city's south side. They were the kind of men who worked for cash and never asked names. I need you to send her a message, Marcus said, sliding a thick envelope across the table. Scare her, break something. Make her realize she's not untouchable. The taller man smirked. You want her quiet or gone? Marcus hesitated. His breath came shallow. Not gone, not yet, just broken enough to know who holds the power. The men nodded, pocketed the cash, and vanished into the night. 2 nights later, as Layla sat in her study reviewing documents, the sound of shattering glass jolted her. A brick crashed through the window, scattering shards across the floor. Kofi rushed in, grabbing the brick. Wrapped around it was a note scrawled in crude letters. Stay quiet or next time it's you. Uncle Tundi locked the doors while Kofi scanned the street, but the culprits were long gone. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Layla's hands trembled slightly, but she steadied herself. She looked at the brick, then at the binder of fraud records. "This is his doing," she said softly, her eyes burning with new fire. "He's desperate, and desperate men always reveal themselves." The next morning, the news broke again, but this time the narrative shifted even further against Marcus. An anonymous leak had sent the fraudulent contracts to multiple news outlets. They splashed across TV screens and social media feeds. Marcus Reed's empire built on lies. Evidence shows. Community funds diverted for personal gain. Crowds gathered outside his office building, chanting, demanding justice. Investors pulled their money. Even Vanessa, once at his side, appeared on television. Her words cut sharper than any knife. "Marcus lied to me, to his wife, and to the entire city. I can no longer stand by a man who built his wealth on betrayal." Marcus watched the broadcast in silence, his face twisted in rage. He slammed the remote against the table. "She'll regret this. They all will." But while Marcus seethed in isolation, Layla grew stronger. Her story spread beyond Atlanta, carried by networks and bloggers across the country. She wasn't just a paralyzed wife humiliated by her husband. She was a symbol of resilience, of dignity, of justice. At a town hall meeting, people cheered her name. They raised their fists in solidarity. "Adeyemi blood builds, it doesn't break," one man shouted. Layla smiled faintly, her heart steady. But she knew this wasn't the end. Marcus was wounded, and wounded men were dangerous. As the crowd dispersed, Kofi leaned in and murmured, "He won't stop until he's destroyed." Question is, Layla, will you let him destroy himself, or will you push him over the edge? The choice loomed heavy, like a storm on the horizon. The city's skyline glittered in the distance, but for Marcus, the lights meant nothing. His empire was collapsing, one contract cancellation, one lost investor at a time. Headlines kept multiplying like wounds he couldn't bandage. Marcus Reed's fortune in free fall. Board members distanced themselves amid fraud scandal. The calls had stopped. Friends who once flooded his phone now vanished. Even the bankers who once poured him champagne at fundraisers refused to answer his messages. Marcus sat in his penthouse, whiskey glass in hand, staring at the city he had thought he owned. "If they won't respect me," he muttered, voice low and bitter, "then they'll fear me." Meanwhile, Layla stood before a packed hall at the Model Community Center. Reporters, lawyers, and residents filled every chair. Behind her hung a banner her grandfather had once used, "Dignity in every home." She spoke with quiet authority. "My husband believed humiliation could silence me. Instead, it revealed the truth. He betrayed not just me, but every family who trusted him. Tonight, we begin legal action to recover every stolen dollar, every stolen dream." The crowd erupted in cheers. Some wept openly, others shouted blessings. For the first time in years, Layla felt not just protected but empowered. But in the shadows outside, Marcus's hired men watched through the glass windows. One pulled out his phone and typed a message. "She's stronger than expected. What are the orders?" Minutes later, a reply came back from Marcus. "If you can't scare her, break what she loves." That same night, Kofi drove Layla home. The streets were quiet, rainwater gleaming under the street lamps. As they pulled into the driveway, they noticed the front gate slightly ajar. Kofi's instincts flared. "Stay here," he warned, stepping out of the car. He scanned the shadows, his hand tight around a flashlight. Inside the house, they found chaos. Drawers ransacked, documents scattered, family photos torn from the walls. But it wasn't theft. They hadn't taken valuables. It was a message. On the living room wall, written in spray paint, were the words, "This is only the beginning." Uncle Tundi arrived minutes later, his face grim. "He has crossed into madness," he said. "This isn't intimidation anymore. It's war." Layla sat in her chair, staring at the vandalized wall. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice calm but ironclad. "Then we fight, but not with fear, with truth, with law, with dignity." The next morning, Layla made a bold move. She released the fraud records to federal investigators, bypassing local courts where Marcus had influence. Within hours, agents began reviewing his contracts, freezing accounts linked to suspicious activity. Marcus's fury exploded when he heard. He threw his phone across the room and roared, "She's trying to put me in prison." His last loyal associate leaned in carefully. "Marcus, if you don't act now, you'll lose everything." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Then we end this once and for all." 2 nights later, as Layla left a meeting with her lawyers, a black SUV trailed her van through the darkened streets. Kofi noticed it in the rearview mirror. His grip tightened on the wheel. "They're following us," he said. Layla's eyes flickered to the side mirror, catching the glint of headlights that refused to fall back. "Marcus," she whispered. The SUV accelerated, trying to force them off the road. Kofi swerved, tires screeching, as Uncle Tundi braced himself in the back seat. The van nearly clipped a guardrail before Kofi steadied it. "Hold on," he shouted, flooring the gas. The SUV rammed them from behind, jolting everyone forward. Panic surged, but Kofi's focus was unshakable. He veered suddenly into a narrow side street, the van scraping against a dumpster, sparks flying. The SUV tried to follow, but wedged itself between two concrete pillars. They escaped, hearts pounding, the night swallowing them. When they finally reached safety, Layla sat silently for a moment, her breath steadying. Then she spoke, her eyes blazing. "This isn't about humiliation anymore. He's trying to destroy me, but if he wants war, he'll get it. On my terms." And so the stage was set. Marcus had turned to violence, and Layla had turned to the full weight of her grandfather's legacy. The question was no longer if Marcus would fall, but how hard he would crash. The night after the attempted car attack, the city buzzed with rumors. News outlets whispered of federal investigations deepening, of frozen accounts and board members fleeing Marcus Reed's sinking empire. But Marcus wasn't in hiding. He was plotting. In a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, he paced like a predator. His hired men stood in the shadows, waiting for orders. Marcus's voice was low, venomous. "She wants to play with courts and lawyers," he sneered. "But while she hides behind papers, we'll show her that power belongs to those who take it. Tonight, we make her afraid to leave her house." One of the men hesitated. "Boss, the feds are already circling. If we move too hard, they'll put you away faster." Marcus's glare silenced him. "Do what I pay you for. Leave her shaken. Make her believe she's not untouchable." The men nodded reluctantly. The line between loyalty and fear had grown thin. That evening, Layla hosted a small gathering at the Model Community Center. Lawyers, allies, and residents came together to celebrate the freezing of Marcus's accounts. Music filled the air, children played nearby, and for a brief moment, hope felt tangible. Then the power cut. The hall plunged into darkness. Gasps echoed, followed by the sound of glass breaking outside. People screamed as a group of masked men stormed the entrance, carrying bats and chains. Kofi moved instantly, positioning himself between Layla and the attackers. Uncle Tunda pulled her chair back, shielding her as chaos erupted. The men overturned tables, smashed windows, and shouted threats. "Tell your queen her crown won't save her," one bellowed before hurling a chair against the wall. But then, sirens, blue and red lights washed over the community center. The men panicked, scattering into the night. Federal agents stormed in, weapons drawn, forcing the intruders to the ground. Layla sat in the center of it all, calm despite the chaos, her eyes fixed on the doorway where Marcus himself now stood, flanked by agents. He was handcuffed, rage twisting his features. "This isn't over, Layla," he shouted as they dragged him toward the waiting vehicles. "You'll regret crossing me." The crowd erupted in cheers, voices rising like a storm breaking. Some shouted prayers, others clapped and sang. For the first time, Marcus Reed was not the king of Atlanta. He was a man in chains. Later, back at her home, Layla sat quietly with the binder open on her lap. Uncle Tunde placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done what many couldn't," he said. "But be careful. Snakes still bite even when their heads are cut." Layla nodded. "I know, Marcus isn't finished yet, but neither am I." Her eyes glimmered with determination. The fight had shifted, but it was far from over. Viewers, Marcus has now been arrested, but do you think this will finally stop him? Or will his hunger for revenge push him to strike even harder from the shadows? What would you do if you were in Layla's position? Fight him in court or use his own tactics against him? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping stories. The morning after Marcus's arrest, newspapers carried his mugshot on the front page. His once polished smile was gone, replaced by a scowl of fury. The headline read, "From Gala King to Jail Cell, Marcus Reed in custody amid fraud allegations." Across the city, people whispered. Investors who once praised him now pretended they never knew his name. Donors distanced themselves. Socialites who had flocked to his parties deleted old photos. But Marcus wasn't broken. Behind the gray walls of Fulton County Jail, he sat in a cell with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, dangerous tone. "You still owe me favors," he told the man on the other end. "Judges don't move without someone pulling strings. Get me bail, get me leverage, and I'll take back everything she stole." The man hesitated, then muttered, "You've lost too much, Marcus. Maybe it's time." Marcus slammed the receiver down, eyes blazing. "It's never time to quit." Meanwhile, at the Adeyemi home, Layla sat with her lawyers and allies. The binder of trust documents lay open, but her eyes were drawn to something new, papers tucked in the back of the wooden box she hadn't noticed before. She pulled them out slowly. "What is it?" Uncle Tunda asked. Her voice was steady. "Another addendum." The document, signed and sealed by her grandfather, revealed something astonishing. A hidden investment portfolio worth tens of millions, spread across international banks. It was money untouched, growing quietly for years. But it wasn't just money. The addendum also included a clause. Should any member of the Adeyemi family face threats to life, liberty, or dignity, funds from this account may be used to ensure their safety by any legal means necessary. Her grandfather had anticipated everything, even Marcus's desperation. Kofi leaned forward. "This isn't just protection, this is ammunition. With this, you can fund investigations, protect communities, even outmaneuver Marcus if he tries to crawl back." Layla closed the folder, resolve hardening. "Then we use it. Marcus thought humiliation would destroy me. He didn't realize it would only make me stronger." But Marcus wasn't idle in jail. He made calls through intermediaries, passing notes to lawyers and bribed guards. He spun stories of being the victim, a man betrayed by his wife's greed. He whispered into the ears of allies still clinging to power, painting Layla as a cold-hearted opportunist. One evening, his lawyer visited with grim news. "Marcus, the fraud evidence is airtight, but—" He paused, eyes narrowing. "There might be another angle. If we frame Layla as unfit, unstable, if we claim her condition leaves her incapable of managing the trust." Marcus smirked. "Yes, turn her strength into weakness. Make the world believe she's nothing without me." 2 days later, a motion was filed in court. Marcus, through his lawyers, challenged Layla's control of the Adeyemi Trust. The argument was cruel but cunning, that she was medically incapable of exercising sound judgment due to her paralysis and emotional state. The news hit hard. Reporters swarmed her home. Questions flew. "Mrs. Reed, are you competent to manage your inheritance? Do you believe Marcus has a case?" For a moment, Layla felt the sting of old wounds, the whispers she had endured since the accident. But then she remembered her grandfather's words. Some become roofs, some become leaks. She rolled forward, looked straight into the cameras, and said with quiet force, "My condition does not define my mind. My wheelchair does not silence my voice. Marcus humiliated me once in public, and I will answer him in public again through the truth. And the truth is this: I am stronger than he will ever be." The clip went viral within hours. Millions watched, shared, and rallied behind her. Hashtags spread across social media. "Stand with Layla" and "Dignity in every home." That night, as she sat alone in her study, she unfolded her grandfather's letter once more. Her eyes rested on a line she hadn't fully noticed before. "When the time comes, you must reveal what even Marcus never suspected. The final inheritance is not money, but the truth of who truly built this city." Her breath caught. She glanced back at the documents. There was something more, hidden deeper in the trust. Something her grandfather wanted her to discover only at the right moment. And that moment was coming fast. The courthouse was packed. Reporters filled the gallery, their cameras flashing. Supporters from the model community came wearing T-shirts with bold letters. "Adeyemi builds, greed destroys." The tension was thick, each whisper echoing like thunder. At the front, Layla sat tall in her wheelchair, her lawyers flanking her. Across the aisle, Marcus entered in a tailored suit, freshly pressed but unable to hide the desperation in his eyes. He tried to smile for the cameras, but the smirk didn't reach his face. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, called the court to order. Marcus's lawyers stood first, their arguments sharp and rehearsed. "Your Honor, this case is about fitness. While we do not question Mrs. Adeyemi Reed's inheritance, we question her capacity to manage it. Her medical condition and emotional fragility render her incapable of overseeing assets of this magnitude. My client, Marcus Reed, has the experience and vision to—" Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gallery. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others scowled. Then Layla's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, what Mr. Reed calls fragility, we call resilience. What he calls incapacity, we call leadership. Evidence will show not only that Mrs. Adeyemi Reed is fully competent, but that Mr. Reed himself is guilty of fraud, intimidation, and attempted coercion." The judge nodded. "Proceed." One by one, witnesses testified. Community members spoke of how Layla had personally overseen projects, designed homes, and restored hope when Marcus ignored them. Bank officers confirmed the trust's protections. Federal agents presented evidence of Marcus's fraudulent contracts. Finally, Layla herself was called to the stand. The courtroom grew silent as she wheeled forward, her presence commanding. She looked at Marcus directly. "My husband humiliated me in front of the world, thinking it would silence me. But humiliation does not erase dignity. Betrayal does not erase truth, and weakness does not erase strength. She held up the binder. This trust is not just money. It is a blueprint for justice. My grandfather built this city with his hands, brick by brick. He left me not just wealth, but responsibility, and I will not let Marcus or anyone take that away. Her words carried through the courtroom like a drumbeat. People in the gallery nodded, some wiping tears. Then came the final blow. Her lawyer presented the last sealed envelope from the trust. The judge opened it, scanned the page, and her eyebrows rose. "This document," she said firmly, "names Layla Timitope Adeyemi Reed as the sole trustee and controlling shareholder of Reed Coal Developments, effective immediately upon proof of spousal humiliation. This condition has clearly been met." A stunned silence followed. Then whispers erupted. "She owns the company. She owns everything." Marcus shot to his feet. "This is a lie. It's forged," he shouted, his voice cracking. The judge's gavel slammed. "Sit down, Mr. Reed, or you'll be held in contempt." But Marcus couldn't stop. "You can't do this to me. I built this city. I made her. She's nothing without me." His outburst only sealed his fate. The judge leaned forward, voice like steel. "What you've built, Mr. Reed, is an empire of deceit. This court rules in favor of Mrs. Adeyemi Reed. You are stripped of all claims to the Adeyemi Trust and Reed Coal Developments. Further, your fraudulent actions are referred to federal prosecutors for criminal trial." The gavel struck. Judgment was final. The gallery exploded in cheers. Supporters rushed to embrace Layla, chanting her name. Reporters clamored for statements. Uncle Tunde wept openly, his hand on her shoulder. Kofi stood by the door, watching Marcus being dragged out in handcuffs, his empire in ruins. Vanessa, sitting quietly in the back, rose and slipped out unnoticed. For the first time, she realized she had been clinging to the wrong king. Later that evening, as the sun set over Atlanta, Layla sat on the porch of the model community. Children's laughter echoed around her. Music drifted from open windows, and the smell of jollof rice filled the air. She unfolded her grandfather's last letter again. This time, she read the line she had missed before, now in its full light. "My Layla, your inheritance is not measured in dollars. It is measured in the dignity you restore, the people you lift, and the name you protect. Money will fade, but legacy will endure." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of triumph. She looked out at the homes, at the community she now fully controlled, and whispered, "I will honor you, Papa, always." The camera of the moment lingered on her face, resolute, radiant, unbroken. And in the distance, the city lights glowed brighter than ever, as if bowing to its new builder.